Hey guys! Normally I try to do videos on things that I feel like I know something about, like topics that I have a grasp on. Today's gonna be a little different though. I'm gonna make fun of myself a little bit. I started learning French maybe about 2 years ago, but I really started studying it about a year and a half ago. So I'm not a beginner, but I'm also certainly not an expert yet either. I've seen a lot of progress in my level over the past year and a half, but there are still some things that I'm struggling with, obviously, because I'm not fluent, and I mean, even when I'm fluent, there's gonna probably be things that are just always gonna be there that drive me crazy. And pronunciation of certain words is definitely one of those things. So today, instead of playing to my strengths, I'm just gonna pick out all the weaknesses and tell you guys the words I can't pronounce in French. Of course, we have to start with the nasal sounds. I think this is the hardest thing for me just as a whole in the French language. And the nasal sound that I still have the most trouble with is the IN. It's hard enough for English speakers to try and get the sound to come straight through your nose, but the IN I feel like is the highest in your nose, I guess. This one varies based on the accent, but I'm sort of trying for a standard French sound, so it's kind of an sound. So for example, the word for morning is matin. That probably was wrong, actually. Copain, demain. It's so hard for me to get that right every time, but it gets a little harder when it starts with an IN. For example, intelligent or intéressant. It's very, very difficult to get that right. Even though it's understandable, I think, in those words, it just sounds ugly to me when I say it. When the French speaker says it, it's so beautiful, and when I say it, it's not beautiful anymore. Another word I have trouble with is the word for my favorite color, convenient, and that's purple, pourpre. This one is super hard because it has 2 R's in it, and the French R is one of the hardest sounds, I think, for English speakers to make. The French R is very different from like the Spanish R, for example. A lot of people can roll their tongue in the front. Well, maybe not a lot of people, but I feel like more people can do that than the French R. It's also hard when words start with R's for me, because for me it seems to be either a really strong R or basically non-existent R. I'm okay with either of those. It's when you kind of have to give it that soft, but still there sound. And when you start with an R, you have to kind of master that. So for me, it normally probably comes out as if I'm trying to like cough up something, like roi. That's the word for king in French, and I think the hardest part of that is still just starting with the R sound. And inconveniently, another word I have trouble with is the word for to look, which I have to use all the time, and that's regarder, regarder. And this goes for another color as well, the color red. Rouge. Starting with that R again is just really hard for me. I feel like I never can do it right. Another hard part of that word is the oo sound in it, and French has 2 oo sounds, and in English we have 1 basically, and I feel like it's sort of in between those. So it's really hard at first just to hear the difference between those sounds, and even when you can hear it, then pronouncing it properly. For a while I think I was saying rouge instead of rouge, and I think that was just because first I didn't hear the difference in the sounds, and then even when I could hear it, I had a really hard time kind of figuring out how to pronounce it. So that means I also have a little trouble with words like beaucoup, for example. And this one you kind of need to get right because pronouncing it with the other U sound means something very different. I still feel like I have to make an extra effort to make sure I get that sound right because it's still more natural for it to come out the other way. This goes the opposite direction with the U and the oo sound as well. Sometimes I'll flip it the other direction and pronounce things that should be oo as oo. For example, I've been corrected a few times I've said the word culture because I will say culture. That's kind of weird because in my experience it's almost always the other way around, but it does happen. These words do exist when for some reason I want to use the opposite sound, the harder sound for me to make. Another tough sound for me to make is when you have the sound and the I sound. For example, feuille, which is the word for leaf. I don't know why this one is so hard because neither of the sounds separately are very difficult, but for some reason when you put them together, I think my vowels just sort of want to slur together in a way that they should not slur together. Taking the difficulty level up a notch, you have the word for welcome, which is accueillir. It's that same sound, the eir, but you add a few other sounds, and for some reason that makes it just way harder. Again, it's so beautiful when native speakers say it, and when I try to say it, it just sounds so ugly. I feel like that's one of the worst things about French. It's so beautiful if you're a native speaker or a really fluent speaker, but if you're not, it's so bad. And the last word on the list has to do with the fact that in French, you don't always pronounce the ends of words. Sometimes it's vowels, sometimes it's consonants, but there are just a lot of silent letters in French, especially on the ends. However, they're not always silent. They don't always follow this beautiful pattern of silent or not silent. Sometimes you kind of have to guess whether or not you pronounce them, and you have to memorize which words you pronounce the endings of. And one like this is the word for egg. This one's especially weird because it's pronounced differently in the singular and the plural, and not because you add an S and do you not pronounce the S, because you never do. It's the F on the end of the word. So you have ouf, singular, and plural, I think. You pronounce the F in the singular form, and you do not pronounce the F or the S in the plural form. This makes no sense to me. Every time I encounter this word, I have to sit there and think for a second, wait, which form do you pronounce the F? Which one do you not? I don't remember. It makes no sense. Is there sense to this? Please let me know in the comments if you find some sense in this, because I need something to help me remember this. This issue also comes around again when I try to say that makes sense in French, which is ça a du sens. And every time I think I just kind of flip-flop. Should I say sens? Should I say sens? Do I pronounce the S? Do I not? I don't remember. And I think why that one gets me every time is because when you conjugate the verb se sentir, you say je me sens. So you don't pronounce the S, it's spelled the exact same way. But when it's the noun, ça a du sens, you pronounce the S. Of course, the funny thing there is that that doesn't make sense, so ça n'a pas du sens. Anyway, I could probably continue this video for a while longer, but I'm just gonna stop there because I think I've covered the bases of the general sounds that I have difficulties with in each of these words. And normally it does kind of come down to that. It's just certain sounds that I have difficulty pronouncing. Surprisingly, this was actually really fun to pick out my weaknesses and make fun of myself, so I hope you guys enjoyed it too. Merci d'avoir regardé cette vidéo. Peut-être dans l'avenir, je peux faire une vidéo complète en français, mais pour ce moment, je pense que je ne suis pas prête. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to give it a like so you can let me know. And also, if you haven't subscribed yet, I've done more videos similar to this in the past, and I can do more in the future. So if you want to see them when they come out, you gotta subscribe. Thank you guys all so much for watching, and I will see you in my next video. A fun fact for you, I don't think I've worn this dress since like VidCon 2013. It's been that long.